The question you're asking is an incredibly important one. What happens if the government violates those orders after they're entered? And we've seen courts be far less tolerant of that. For instance, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is now rehearing en banc a related issue involving the deployment of the National Guard in Portland. Now the full court is going to hear that case, in part because the state of Oregon has made an allegation that the government was not truthful in representations it made to the court.
Just today, an appeals court stepped in, and to use the Associated Press word suddenly, and the AP is not given to overstatement, suddenly blocked an order requiring a senior Border Patrol official to give unprecedented daily briefings to a judge about immigration sweeps in Chicago. This was Judge Sarah Ellis, who essentially was told by the appeals court that her order that these meetings proceed so that the Border Patrol answer for its conduct in Chicago will not happen right now. And this conduct includes, for example, using tear gas when they had been ordered not to, an ICE agent aiming a gun at a U.S. citizen and saying, "Bang, bang, you're dead, liberal." Um, Violations that included the tear gas episode when children were out in their Halloween costumes. And the judge, Sarah Ellis, essentially said, "I need you to report to me every day, and you are not to be doing these things." And that didn't happen. Can you talk about today's appeals court decision and what it bodes for putting any kind of reins or accountability on this conduct?
Right. So the important thing to understand is that much of Judge Ellis's order actually remains in effect, particularly her order regarding conduct by CBP and ICE in this area. The portion that the court has temporarily held off on is a very unusual request from a federal judge that I think signifies how deeply disturbed she was with this commander and the agent's failure to comply with her orders. And so she put them on a very short leash and essentially told the commander, "Come in every day at 6 p.m. and tell me about the arrests you've made and what's going on." It was just a very unusual step. The court appears, we don't really know, they don't give us a lot to understand about their reasoning for doing this. They appear to have put it on hold as a temporary measure while they assess the issues. Where this ultimately ends up, we're going to have to wait to find out. But, even with this order temporarily stayed, it's a powerful warning to the government that it must comply with court orders. The Seventh Circuit is likely to be far less understanding of the government's position if they continue to violate the orders that exist that, for instance, tell them that they cannot use tear gas without 2 warnings and time for civilians to disperse among peacefully protesting civilian populations.
Given that there seems to already have been a violation or appears to be a violation of Judge Ellis's order, um, what's to be held to account in that case? Because if they're getting away with it once, what's to say that the appeals court admonitions will do any good, even if those are on the books?
Yeah, well, so she entered the order after the earlier behavior, and that was what led her to take these extraordinary steps. I think, conflicting conducts about what continues to take place. And so, this is why we have courts in the first place. When there are competing versions of the truth in important situations, we call upon the courts to reconcile those issues. She's the trial judge in this instance. She's the judge who will hear the evidence about what's going on the ground and will ultimately make decisions about government conduct. The question you're asking is an incredibly important one. What happens if the government violates those orders after they're entered? And we've seen courts be far less tolerant of that. For instance, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is now rehearing en banc a related issue involving the deployment of the National Guard in Portland. Now the full court is going to hear that case, in part because the state of Oregon has made an allegation that the government was not truthful in representations it made to the court.
And isn't that in itself astonishing? There seem to be representations that are not omissions, but maybe commissions.
Let me just say, I mean, I think it's important for us to not get carried away before we know the facts in these situations. But this does look to be very serious. The allegation that the state of Oregon has made is that in court, the government represented that 151 federal officers were moved into Portland to protect federal buildings, and that interfered with the operations of this entity. This government office had forced them to bring in officers from other places. Then the state of Oregon says, we received discovery from the government in this case after they made that argument, Your Honor. And it turns out that the discovery, the information we've received from the government, suggests that that's not true. So the court will now have the opportunity to scrutinize everything and hear the government side of the story. If it's as the state of Oregon alleges, it's a very serious matter.
And we'll see you again here. We look forward to your support and your continued attention to the programs that you see right now on your screen that we're going to be offering through the end of the year, a very important year with a perhaps even more important year ahead of us in 2026. I'm Pat Morrison. Thanks on behalf of all of the team here for joining us.